Hello, everyone. It's Tony Princiotti, principal guest conductor of the Vermont Symphony, with another podcast about great music and great musicians. In this edition, we ask the question, did Mozart, the composer of some of the world's most beloved operas, sacred music, and instrumental works, the creator of sounds that supposedly boost our IQs and soothe the brains of epileptics, an artist whose music is often considered so perfect as to have been divinely inspired, did this Mozart suffer from the disorder known as Tourette syndrome? Mostly as a result of the film Amadeus, our image of Mozart lines up with stereotypes we often attach to artists. He was a bohemian wild man, a poorly socialized savant, a rebel, the ultimate out-of-control, slightly mad artistic genius. But over the past couple of decades, medical researchers with an interest in music have taken a new look at contemporary and historical accounts of Mozart's behavior, as well as his personal writings. And they've developed research indicating that the oddities in Mozart's conduct, his speech, and his mannerisms weren't so much eccentricities as they were symptoms of Tourette's. So, what is Tourette syndrome? It's a neuropsychiatric disorder that appears to have a genetic basis. It comes on during childhood, and it's characterized by compulsive behavior and a combination of both physical tics, uncontrolled twitches, grimaces, blinking, head and shoulder jerks, etc., and vocal tics, such as involuntary grunting, coughing, barking, or throat clearing. The best known of the vocal symptoms is called coprolalia. Now that's a word that sounds like what it means. This is when a person randomly blurts out inappropriate or obscene words, although actually only a small minority of people with Tourette's do this. TS, as it's known, has no effect on intelligence, and in most cases it isn't debilitating. So, what behaviors did Mozart exhibit that make researchers think he might have had Tourette's? One clue is his letters, many of which are filled with endless, silly puns and the foulest sorts of scatological references. For instance, in a letter to his cousin Marianne from February of 1778, he writes, "Muck, muck, ah, muck, sweet word, muck, chuck, that too is fine, muck, chuck, muck, suck, oh, charmante, muck, suck, that's what I like, muck, chuck, and suck, chuck, buck, and suck, buck." Keep in mind that when Mozart wrote this, he was 22, and the life expectancy in Central Europe was only slightly above 30, so he was a full-grown adult. Here's another letter from the year before. "Dearest Cuz Buzz, I have received reprieved your highly esteemed writing biting, and I have doted thy my uncle Garfunkel, my aunt Slant, and you, too, are all well mel. We, too, thank God, are in good fettle kettle. You write further, indeed you let it all out, you expose yourself, you let yourself be heard, you give me notice, you declare yourself, you indicate to me, you bring me the news, you announce unto me, you state in broad daylight, you demand, you desire, you wish, you want, you like, you command that I, too, could send you my portrait. Oh well, I shall mail fail it for sure." He even wrote a set of scatological rounds to sing with friends, the most famous one having the trenchant title, "Kiss My Butt." Researchers have also found classic symptoms of Tourette's in contemporary accounts of Mozart's behavior. He was described as constantly being in motion, doing several things at once, frequently grimacing for no apparent reason, and inadvertently moving his hands and feet repetitively. One friend wrote about an incident in which Mozart was at the piano, improvising on a tune from his opera, The Marriage of Figaro, when he suddenly jumped up from the keyboard and started running around the room, leaping over chairs and tables, meowing like a cat, and turning somersaults. The question about all this that interests me the most as a musician is, if Mozart had Tourette's, did it affect his music? And if it did, how? Mozart's music has long been considered the acid test of a player's ability, and the explanations for this are usually pretty basic, mostly about how the clarity of the textures makes it easy to hear everything you're doing. But I think there's more to it. To all appearances, Mozart's music embodies all of the aesthetic values of his time, the so-called Age of Reason. Art was supposed to be clear, graceful, and understandable. But where many of Mozart's fellow composers took these ideas to the point where their music became square and formulaic, Mozart's music almost always has a subtext of constant change and hyperactivity. It makes his music compelling and really difficult to play. Playing Mozart well is like doing acrobatics without breaking a sweat while wearing a fine dress suit. To demonstrate, I'm going to play a short snippet from the first movement of Mozart's Fifth Violin Concerto. Pretty simple, right? And in the broad scheme of things, not too hard to play. But there's a lot packed inside these 7 beats of music. In fact, it has 3 separate expressive gestures. There's a fanfare, then a singing, amorous line, and finally, a little flirtatious tag. 3 really different characters, each requiring a slightly different muscular approach to express properly. And it's stuffed into about 3.5 seconds of music. And of course, this is a very isolated example. When you play this stuff in context, it's like navigating an obstacle course. Mozart's music was often criticized for being too jumpy and having too much in it. One of his contemporaries wrote that he leaves his hearer out of breath, for hardly has he grasped on a beautiful thought, when another of greater fascination dispels the first. And this goes on throughout, so that in the end it is impossible to retain any one of these beautiful melodies. And of course, there was the famous remark of the emperor after the premiere of Mozart's opera, The Abduction from the Seraglio.
Of course, now and then, just now and then, it seemed a touch,
What do you mean, sire?
well, I mean, occasionally it seems to have, how should one say, how shall one say, Director?
Too many notes, Your Majesty.
Exactly, very well put. Too many notes.
I don't understand. There are just as many notes, Majesty, as are required, neither more nor less.
Well, my dear fellow, there are, in fact, only so many notes the ear can hear in the course of an evening. I think I'm right in saying that, aren't I, court composer?
Yes. On the whole, yes, Majesty.
Believe it or not, this conversation actually occurred, at least in some form. But of course, eventually Mozart's music won the day. Looking back from an era when a news broadcast commonly fills a screen with a dozen or more separate pieces of information, it's a little hard to believe that Mozart's supremely elegant music was once considered to be cluttered. It's possible that the greatness of Mozart's work is just another case of that randomly occurring combination of factors we pull together under the term genius, and we'll probably never know if he suffered from Tourette's syndrome. But as we consider the possibility, we might find ourselves starting to look beyond the easy narratives and images we associate with him. And as we consider the realities of Mozart's day-to-day existence, with all of its actual internal and external challenges, we may come away with an even greater appreciation for what he achieved in his very short life.